Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. This week,
You mean you don't think that I edit videos that are put up on the campaign website?
Governor Tate Reeves clashes with reporters asking questions about campaign funds from key players in the TANF scandal. Insurance Commissioner Mike Chaney talks about the rising cost of severe weather. It's a jam-packed program this Sunday on Mississippi Insight. Governor Tate Reeves insists that his campaign will donate contributions from those implicated in the welfare scandal to charity. Governor Reeves doubled down Wednesday on his promise from 2020, saying the campaign has every intention in giving away campaign funds from those involved in the welfare scandal. 12 News senior political correspondent Richard Lake was one of the reporters who questioned the Republican incumbent on the sidelines of a ribbon-cutting event in Raymond.
I'll let you go first.
Absolutely, sir. Any updates you can tell us about returning those campaign contributions from those implicated in the welfare?
Yeah, we have every intention of returning those contributions that were made prior to 2020 at the conclusion of the litigation as well as the criminal investigations, both of which are ongoing as we speak. Obviously, as you well know, the criminal investigations are being led by the Department of Justice, the District Attorney's Office in Hinds County, the State Auditor's Office, and others. And then the Department of Human Services is suing in civil litigation to recover the money from all of those that exist out there. And obviously it's a continuing process, but we have every intention of returning those funds at the appropriate time.
I'm just curious.
We'll just wait just a second.
In 2020 you said that you were going to move to a separate bank account. Has that been done? Do you happen to know where the money is?
As you are obviously aware, we have over $9 million in our account. We intend to refund those dollars to a private charity at the appropriate time, and that's what we plan to do.
So has it been moved to a separate bank account?
It is currently continues to be in the same account. We have probably 5 or 6 different accounts situated through Friends of Tate Reeves as well as Tate for Governor, and those monies, that $9,000 or somewhere in that range, will be refunded at the appropriate time.
Yeah. So according to Secretary of State's website, it was $8,500.
Is that right?
Is that around the?
Again, I don't keep up with the day-to-day of every single penny that's given to me, but I'm sure that seems like it's in the ballpark. But again, it's an ongoing investigation, and as additional people pipe up or don't pipe up, and once more and more decisions are made by both prosecutors as well as the civil litigants, that those numbers may be increased, they may be decreased, and we'll make that contribution to charity once the litigation is finalized.
Right. And last, you said it's very complicated. There's a lot of money involved, just individually with your accounts, everything like that. If you could kind of give us a rough timeline of when the investigation's in, is there anything you can tell us about how fast that money will be given?
Well, obviously the only piece of the investigation in which we are leading is that which is going to try to recover the funds that were misspent. That's the civil litigation, and that is currently before Hinds County Judge Peterson, and she's made a couple of rulings in the last couple of months. I can't tell you with certainty exactly when or how long that case is going to continue, but then the civil on the criminal side, which is primarily being led, of course, by the prosecutors, the district attorney, the Democrat district attorney here in Hinds County, as well as the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Again, that's the time frame is totally and completely up to them.
I'm curious though, why are you waiting?
Hold on just a second.
Those are the questions I asked, sir.
You're done?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm curious, why are you waiting until the conclusion of the investigation with respect to the news? Because they pleaded guilty. It's not like the conclusion will change the outcome of their criminal sentence.
So I'm curious, how long have you been asking me questions, Taylor?
About 4 years.
4 years, 5 years. It was recently that the outlet that you work for asked a question of my office. We responded with a quote, and we said very clearly, please print this in its entirety. Your outlet chose not to do that. And the reason your outlet chose not to do that, I presume, is because they're a Democrat super PAC working for the Presley campaign. You are no longer a journalist. You are a Democrat super PAC working for the Presley campaign. In fact, not only that, your CEO has had to apologize for lying about Republicans. You cannot be a journalist and have to apologize about lying about Republicans. And so, Taylor, this is not personal. I like you. But when you went to work for a Democrat super PAC, you don't get to follow around and ask the governor questions. We don't answer questions from the Presley campaign, period.
So you're
Do you have
gonna
anything
answer
else?
questions?
You used 2019 footage of yourself in the New Summit School touting a public school ad. Can you tell us why that footage was used? Assuming that you were not the one that edited the video, of course. Is there anything you can tell us about why that was there?
You mean you don't think that I edit videos that are put up on the campaign website? I actually, as governor, I have a full-time job, and I stay pretty busy. I presume that the fact that those videos were shot over 5 years ago, and for whatever reason, I guess whomever did the editing decided that it was a good picture, and that's the reason they put it in the campaign ad. But you know, I find it interesting that those of you in the press want to talk about campaign shots that were shot over 5 years ago, yet you will not ask Brandon Presley what his position is on House Bill 1020. You will not ask Brandon Presley what his position is on our decision to allow girls to only play girl sports and boys to only play boy sports. You will not ask him questions that are important to the citizens of Mississippi. You focus on a campaign shot that was shot 5 years ago for a TV commercial, but you won't ask the Presley campaign real questions about issues that affect real Mississippians. For folks in Hinds County, House Bill 1020 is really important. I think it would be nice to know what the Democrat candidates for governor, both of them, have to say about that, and I would encourage you to ask that.
We definitely will, and I think
you should. I think that'd be great.
Right, and the main focus is considering who was implicated in the ownership and function of that school. Do you have a message to voters who may be skeptical of simply just your proximity to that? It has raised questions for people.
There were a lot of kids that went to that school over the years that benefited from having a school such as that in effect. And when we talk about school funding, the billions and billions and billions of dollars that we spend every year on schools across Mississippi, it ought to be about the kids. Are the kids benefiting? And there's no doubt that in the TANF scandal, there were some really bad things done by individuals. There are those who committed crimes and have now pled guilty to it. And no one is working harder to ensure that that money that was stolen from the taxpayers is returned to the taxpayers. That's the reason we're leading the effort to sue those individuals. Literally dozens and dozens of individuals are getting sued by the Department of Human Services to recover those funds. The criminal side is being handled by the prosecutors, as you would expect it to be. The civil, the civil side is being handled by the Department of Human Services, and we will continue to do that.
That's Governor Reeves talking with reporters Wednesday. We should know the News and John Davis have both pleaded guilty to federal charges and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. We are picking up a topic that we touched on last week with temperature averages rising in our state. The risks are growing for climate instability and more frequent severe weather events. Are the cost of storms, flooding, tornadoes, and the like rising as well? Joining me now in the studio is a public official who often reminds us of the need for weather preparedness. Mike Chaney is Mississippi's Insurance Commissioner and State Fire Marshal. Commissioner Chaney, welcome to Mississippi Insight.
Thank you for having me here.
Let's start out with those powerful tornadoes that ripped through the parts of the state back in March, including Rolling Fork, Amory, and other communities. Your office has been collecting data from damage reports and all that. What can you tell us about that point of the cost of damage through insurance and the uninsured as well when it comes to those tornadoes that ripped through?
So the tornadoes that went through Sharkey and Issaquah counties and Montgomery County and went on up to Monroe County, that includes, and Humphreys County because that's Belzona and Silver City area. Last Monday, the total damage that we had on insurance was a little over $150 million. We'll get a new report in the morning due to the Memorial Day weekend, and it'll probably end up being very close to $200 million on insured loss.
And how are people, as far as recovering, how's that going at this point?
Well, I was in Rolling Fork a week ago Sunday in the afternoon. I'd gone up at the invitation of one of the churches for a Rogation Sunday after we went to early church in Vicksburg, drove up, and Mary and I, my wife, drove through Rolling Fork and looked, and a lot of the litter and damage is still yet to be cleaned up. But I understand the Board of Supervisors last Thursday agreed to have a cleanup start again this week, and so I think we'll be back on target, but still a lot of damage, a lot of cleanup left to be done.
When it comes to those communities that are very, very poor in most of those areas, are they, most of the folks insured, uninsured, and if they are uninsured, are they relying on FEMA and other federal resources to help rebuild? Well,
in the case of, let's just take Rolling Fork, which is in Sharkey County. A lot of the folks there were not insured, and the reason for that, they had older homes. They already paid them off. You're in the Delta. You have lower income folks, and if you have a manufactured home, you probably didn't have insurance on it. So the challenge for us is, what do you do for those folks? And I'm going to go back to MEMA in just a minute, and FEMA. So Samaritan's Purse, which is part of Franklin Graham's Ministries, has generously agreed to give us up to 500 manufactured homes, and they're manufactured to a new standard to put in Rolling Fork once we get the infrastructures up. I did go to Monroe County, where they gave us the first 8 that have been delivered in Monroe County, and they're up and running within a week. And people say, well, why are you involved in that? That's because I put my other hat on as fire marshal. I have to inspect through my office every manufactured home that's new, it's installed in the state. We have to be sure it's installed properly. And the reason for that is to save lives, make sure they're tied down. So I get involved in a lot of aspects of people's lives. Now, for FEMA will reimburse the local political subdivisions for infrastructure and damage caused to public property, say like the hospital would be an example in Rolling Fork. They will reimburse for, say, the water tank that everybody knows it blew over. And by the way, on the water tank, let me just put this in. We had a guy that drove up there because he knew one of my young fire marshals that was there at night after the tornado, and he worked for the Rural Water Association, and he smelled chlorine gas. And this guy put on a mask and went out and cut off the chlorine gas at the water tank that was leaking. Now, why is that important? Chlorine will kill you. 2 breaths of chlorine, it kills your lungs and you die. Basically, it causes artificial pneumonia. So here's a hero. We didn't even talk about that guy, but that's just something that's interesting of what we do in our other occupation besides insurance. FEMA will cover, through MEMA, will cover a lot of that infrastructure damage, like on the hospital and the water tanks. And in some cases, they will do some of the housing for folks temporarily, but not long range. So a lot of the residents that were displaced have been housed at hotels and motels in Greenville and other cities in the Delta area.
So those who lost their homes, who are not insured, who need a place to live, what is the long-term solution for them?
Well, the long-term solution right now, you can't depend upon the government to come in. We're dependent upon faith-based organizations like Samaritan's Purse. And by the way, they do a great job coming in and providing manufactured homes. And on the other side, if you had insurance, we're working to get the adjusters there. That's where I put my insurance hat back on, to get adjusters there to be certain that those people get their house looked at and they get paid and reimbursed for the insurance damage.
From your perspective, have severe weather events become more expensive for Mississippi in the last few decades?
Well, they have become more expensive, a lot more expensive than what we were used to, due to the cost of replacing a home. And that's also an issue, not just during catastrophic events, but right now for us on the Gulf Coast, because insurance companies will come in, and I don't control these rates. So it makes life hard for us to say, all right, the reimbursement cost for rebuilding a home, that's what you're going to charge on the insurance premium. You're going to charge what it would cost you, say, from $100 to $150 a square foot, plus they're going to put 30% on for material costs after a hurricane or after a catastrophic event. We think that's unfair to the consumer, but you want to be whole on your replacement costs. So we're trying to balance the ball on what it costs us to replace. More money is being lost, so it costs us more when we have a catastrophic event.
Some communities hit 2 months ago are strongly tied to the agricultural sector. Are farms and associated infrastructures especially vulnerable to this weather disruptions?
Farms are to some degree to the crops if they're up, like corn would be a good example. Corn's planted in February, so the corn crops could be damaged. It lays down, but a tornado is small in width compared to a hurricane, so it's a little different from a hurricane. But what damages the agriculture infrastructure are lost to the barns or to the equipment that may be stored, which is damaged. And then the people that normally would work in the agriculture sector may move out and be homeless and they leave. And we're seeing that now in Rolling Fork, specifically. It's estimated that 20% of the people that live there permanently have moved and will not come back already.
Won't come back at all.
Will not come back at all.
Did we see that on the coast after Katrina?
We did see it on the coast after Katrina temporarily, but a lot of those people went back home 2 or 3 years later. But what we did see in New Orleans and the Louisiana areas that were hit by Katrina, those people left, after the flooding. They moved to Houston, Texas, or other areas, and they are just now coming back, and that's 15 years after the fact, almost 17 years after the fact.
And why do you think people will not come back to Rolling Fork in those areas?
Rolling Fork, one, you got to have jobs, and there are no jobs there. The manufacturing plants are gone. What industry you had there is gone, and a lot of it dealt around government payments, so they're gone, and they will not come back. They have no place to live. We have no infrastructure, and that's where FEMA again would come back in, and they won't put infrastructure in until the ground's cleaned up and all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and that may take 24 months. You're not going to wait 24 months to build a house back.
You've been promoting weather preparedness for years, and are all Mississippians getting the message, and are they heeding the warnings that you've been sending out for all those years? And are they doing flood insurance and other insurances that are necessary in those areas? A
lot of Mississippians listen to us, and we try to tell them, look, we don't control flood insurance. That's the National Flood Insurance Program. That's a federal government program. But if you live on the Gulf Coast, you're in our state-run wind pool. That's the insurer of last resort for wind and hail. That means your roof damage. And you've got to have flood if you're in a flood zone. Here's the good thing about it. We've recruited one of the few states, well, actually only 2 of us that have recruited Lloyd's of London, non-admitted companies to come in and write flood. And I talked to a gentleman last week that bought his flood insurance in Jackson, Mississippi at 20% less than what he could buy it on the Gulf Coast. Just being here, because we recruited and got competition and win competition with the federal government.
Who needs flood insurance? If you live along the Mississippi River, live along the Pearl River, how do you know that you might need flood insurance?
Everybody probably needs flood insurance. If the rain falls, I kind of articulate this a little bit with my hands. If rain falls, you're probably covered if it runs out of your faucet. You're covered. If it rises up from rising water, you're not covered unless you have flood insurance. So homeowner policies, that's what we call an HO3, will not cover you unless you have flood insurance for flood damage unless the water rains through your roof or it's due to rain or hail or some other not rising water. It falls from the sky.
Hurricane season starts on Thursday, June 1st.
Hurricane season.
What's the message for those as we begin this hurricane season?
Well, here's the message for you. If be prepared for hurricane season. You've heard me say this. If you live on the Gulf Coast, even if you live Hattiesburg South, have a preparedness of all your insurance policies. Know your prescriptions. Have money for 3 days of travel. Be sure your car stays gassed up most of the time during hurricane season. Don't run it empty like a lot of us do. Keep at least a half a tank so you can get away from harm's case. Let people know where you're going. If you got a cell phone, and 99% of the people have cell phones, take pictures of all your possessions. Know what you have and know what the damage will be when you come back. If you have a cell phone, you can prove it to your insurance company.
How important is it for everyone to heed those hurricane warnings and heed what you're talking about?
It's extremely important. If you have a hurricane warning and you're told to get out and stay out until after the all clear sign's given, you need to stay out because hurricanes kill you. It's normally not so much the wind, it's flying debris. And trying to ride out a hurricane and not knowing if you're going to have water surge or flooding, you're in for a disaster. During Camille, I'd just gotten back from Vietnam. I looked at an apartment unit where 200 and something people had died in Long Beach, Mississippi. Katrina comes along, 2005, apartment units built right back on where 200 and something people died and had a hurricane party. Guess what? Most of our fatalities, that whole apartment complex is gone. Many people lost their lives trying to ride out a hurricane. Don't do that. You need to leave. If you're told to leave, leave.
Do you believe Mississippians are listening now after Katrina or more so than they were before?
I do, Byron, and I will tell you that a lot of your sister stations on the Gulf Coast have put that message out, get out and stay out. That's what you need to do. Y'all do that. The media today is not necessarily published newspapers on paper. The media today is television and radio to some degree. So you're the media that we depend upon to get that message out. And if you notice that what we do at our department is try to get that message out to consumers to say, this is what you need to do to prepare for hurricanes, and you need to leave while you can. If you're told to leave, get out. If it's and we tell the supervisors, it's a double-edged sword, but declare it a mandatory evacuation so the insurance companies will pay the claims if there's any damage. Because it costs you money to leave, and it costs you money to come back. And that's something that in your homeowner's policy is called additional living expense, ALEs. And that's the dollars that they give you to cover your expense for staying in a motel or having to travel and buy gas and et cetera.
All right, Mike Chaney, Commissioner, thank you very much for
Thank
joining
you.
us. All right.
Are we through?
Yeah, we are. We'll be right back.
Well, I could talk another hour now.
If you have comments or questions about today's show or a suggestion for an interview or segment, just drop us a line. Email our producers. The address is news@WJTV.com. Big thanks to Commissioner Mike Chaney and Greg Harper for joining us this week. We'll be back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown. From all of us here at 12 News, make it a great weekend.